I get a lot of questions about using retirement funds to start or buy a business. So, is it true you can use them? Yes. In fact, there are actually three different paths, maybe some that people don't always talk about. And if you saved over $100,000 in retirement funds, it's probably worth understanding all three. Now, none of them may end up being right for you, but knowing your options can help you make the best decision for you in your situation. So, here's how it works. The first path I want to talk about is borrowing, and this is through a 401k loan. So many plans allow you to borrow up to $50,000 if you have at least $100,000 in assets. It's pretty straightforward. You pay it back with interest, usually over 5 years. And this can be a really good option if you need $50,000 or less. Now, to figure out if this is an option that will actually work for you, the best thing to do is check with your plan administrator or your HR department, whoever is in control of your retirement plan, your 401k plan. The second path is investing, and this is through a self-directed IRA. So you can use retirement funds to invest in a business. If you use a self-directed IRA, though, you can only do it as a passive investor. You can't work in the business. You can't even be a vendor or even a key customer. So if that's a route you're interested in, you really want to do angel investments using retirement funds, this is a great option. But you'll need a custodian, and you'll need a custodian that specializes in self-directed IRAs. If you want to figure out who those are, just do a quick Google search. You'll come up with many, many options for people that you can vet to work with. The third path, and the one I get the most questions about just by nature of what I do, is ownership through what's called a ROBS plan, which stands for Rollovers for Business Startups. Now, these are designed for active owners. So this is when your retirement account becomes a shareholder in the company where you're going to be an employee. And by doing it this way, it allows you to avoid the taxes and penalties. It stays an asset of the retirement plan. It does, however, come with some upfront costs and some ongoing compliance requirements. So it's definitely not a do-it-yourself project. Now, of the three, the ROBS is the one I'm most passionate about, and maybe I should be, because in full disclosure, I own a company that's helped almost 35,000 people use this strategy to become business owners over the last couple of decades. But it's also one of the most misunderstood. And part of that's because ROBS isn't for everyone. If you're planning to use less than $100,000, it usually doesn't make sense because the costs and complexities often outweigh the benefits. But in the right situations, it is a super powerful tool. And I thought what I would share with you are the most common reasons I see people choose ROBS as part of their funding strategy, so you can see if there's any alignment with where you're at or what you think is important. So the first one I'll give you is that I see some people that use it simply because that's where their money is. Maybe they've been diligently funding their 401k or IRA for years, and because they've put so much of their savings into their 401k, they don't have a big personal savings account. And so for them, the decision is, hey, either I got to look at how to use these retirement funds or probably not move forward at all. The second one I see commonly is people who use it to buy a bigger business. Now, this shows up most often with people who have been really successful in a corporate career, meaning they're making 6+ figures doing what they're doing. They've made good money. And if they're going to make the jump into business ownership, they need to move into something where they're not going to be making zero day one. And by combining a ROBS with an SBA loan, it's really, quite often people use it to buy a business in the $1 million plus range. So that tends to be big enough to support a 6-figure salary for most owners and most businesses. So that's the number two one. Number three is there are just people who do not like debt. The idea of putting a lien on their house or taking on a big loan payment, that keeps them up at night. That impacts their peace of mind. In fact, I remember listening to Morgan Housel, who's written this great book on finances, and he gives all this great financing advice, and then he will tell you that he's paid down his mortgage. And he says it doesn't make financial sense to do that because the interest rates are so low compared to the opportunity cost of having it in the market. But for him, that peace of mind is worth it, so he can sleep at night. So for those people who don't like debt, ROBS can be a way to help them move forward without that kind of stress. And the fourth reason is there are some people who just want as much financial cushion as possible. They'd rather have extra cash available to handle surprises or even invest in growth rather than risk being undercapitalized. And that's probably a fair concern because the number one reason that we see statistically that businesses go out of business is because they run out of money. So I won't actually get into all the details of how a ROBS plan works here, but I will drop a link in the comments where you can find a comprehensive guide to ROBS that'll answer all those questions. But I did want to talk about, outside of how does it work, there are two questions I get very often, and it's A, why haven't I heard about this? And B, isn't it too good to be true? So let me give you my take on why you haven't heard about this, because I've been doing this for 2 decades. First, just appreciate that business ownership itself is relatively rare. It's only about 7% of US adults that own an established business. Now, when I was growing up, I didn't know any business owners, and I would imagine that's true for many of you too, depending on what sort of circles you grew up in or in currently. Second is that only a portion of people have over $100,000 in retirement savings. And I haven't looked at the data recently, but it is a less than 20% of the population. And that's usually the threshold where ROBS makes sense. And then finally, if you take a step back, Wall Street has trillion-dollar marketing budgets. They're out there selling the ideas of 401ks and IRAs invested in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds because that's how they make money. Your financial advisor doesn't earn fees when you move retirement funds into a business or really any other non-traditional asset. And the other thing I can tell you, just from having done this for 2 decades, as a ROBS provider, we're a niche services company. We have small targeted marketing budgets, and that's why you're usually only going to hear about ROBS once you're actively looking into business ownership. When you're talking to business brokers or franchise consultants or looking at business listings, that's when you're going to come across it, because those are the kind of marketing channels that these smaller companies can afford to market to. Now, going back to the question of, does it sound too good to be true? Maybe for some it does, but I will tell you, the reality is the IRS does not hand out free lunches. What is true is that you can use your retirement funds in a business if you follow the rules. So think of it like this. You can invest your retirement account in the stock of NVIDIA or Tesla, and the same is true if the stock you're buying is in your own company. The difference is when you're an active owner, there are extra rules to make sure you're not abusing the tax advantages. And that's where companies like mine, Guidant Financial, come in, because we help people navigate those rules and protect their retirement funds and their long-term tax benefits. But here's the bottom line. Whether it's a 401k loan, a self-directed IRA, or a ROBS plan, they're just tools. Each of them have their own trade-offs. And if you're serious about business ownership and you've built up some meaningful retirement savings, it's probably worth understanding all three before you decide what the best path is for you to fund your business. Now, again, I'll drop the ROBS guide in the comments. And as always, if you got value out of this, please like it and share it with someone who it might benefit. I wish you the best of luck as you pursue your dreams. Cheers.